Last night at 6:35, we received the biggest threat we've ever received from our closest friends and ally, from President-elect Trump, that they're threatening to put a 25% tariff on all goods coming across the border into the U.S. and Mexico.
Donald Trump just threatened Ford and GM, and this might even disrupt the industry entirely. It isn't just a policy disagreement, it's a full-blown takedown of two of America's most iconic automakers. With billions of dollars at stake and thousands of jobs on the line, Trump's latest announcement has sent shockwaves through the industry, leaving Ford and GM scrambling to defend their position in an already volatile market. But why is Trump targeting these automotive giants now? What decisions pushed him to take such a bold stance? More importantly, how will this battle reshape the auto industry? And what does it mean for the cars you drive, the prices you pay, and the jobs Americans rely on? What does this mean for you? What's happening? Donald Trump just dropped a bombshell, and this time, the target is two of America's most iconic automakers, Ford and General Motors. In a statement that has already sent shockwaves through the auto industry, Trump vowed to take unprecedented action against these companies. He accused them of betraying American workers, outsourcing jobs to foreign countries, and jeopardizing the future of domestic manufacturing. But what exactly triggered this declaration of war? The controversy stems from Ford and GM's recent moves to ramp up production of electric vehicles, a strategic pivot aimed at securing their place in the rapidly evolving automotive landscape. While this sounds like progress, it's not the whole story. To cut costs and remain competitive, both companies have shifted a significant portion of their production overseas, leaving American factory workers in the dust. Trump's response: a fiery warning that he will impose heavy tariffs and potentially push for tighter regulations to rein in their global ambitions. What's more, Trump isn't just speaking to the automakers, he's rallying public sentiment. "We built these companies," he said in a recent rally. "We made them great, and now they're turning their backs on us. It's time to fight back." These words have struck a nerve, sparking debates about the future of American jobs, the rise of electric vehicles, and the shifting priorities of once reliable domestic giants. The problem: why is this happening? To understand why Trump is so enraged, we need to examine the decisions made by Ford and GM. Over the past decade, these companies have faced immense pressure to keep up with competitors like Tesla, whose EVs have captured both market share and public imagination. In response, Ford and GM have poured billions into electric vehicle development, betting their futures on high-tech, eco-friendly models that promise to revolutionize transportation. But there's a catch. Producing EVs is expensive, far more than building traditional gas-powered vehicles. To cut costs, Ford and GM have outsourced much of their manufacturing to countries like Mexico and China, where labor is cheaper and supply chains are more flexible. This shift has left thousands of American workers jobless, sparking outrage among unions, politicians, and now Trump himself. The problem doesn't end there. Critics argue that while these companies chase profit margins, they are ignoring the ripple effects of their actions. Outsourcing not only hurts workers, but also undermines the broader economy, leading to reduced spending power and instability in local communities. Ford and GM's defenders, on the other hand, claim that these decisions are necessary for survival. "If we don't adapt, we die," said one executive in a recent interview. But is this justification enough to sideline American workers and consumers? At the heart of this issue lies a fundamental question: can Ford and GM maintain their commitment to innovation without sacrificing the very workforce that built their legacy? Trump's fiery rhetoric suggests that he doesn't think so, and he's not alone. How this impacts the auto industry, American jobs, and even you. The stakes couldn't be higher. Trump's criticism has already sparked fears of retaliation that could disrupt the delicate balance of the auto industry. If he follows through on his threats to impose heavy tariffs on imported cars and parts, it could send shockwaves through Ford and GM supply chains, driving up costs and delaying production timelines. For American workers, the implications are even more dire. Recent layoffs at Ford and GM facilities have highlighted the human toll of these corporate strategies. In Michigan alone, hundreds of employees have been let go as plants shift their focus to EV production. Some of these workers, who have spent decades building engines and assembling vehicles, now face an uncertain future with few options for retraining. But the ripple effects don't stop there. Suppliers, dealerships, and even small businesses that rely on the automotive ecosystem are bracing for impact. If Trump's policies disrupt the flow of goods and materials, these industries could face massive losses. On the flip side, supporters of Trump's approach argue that such measures are necessary to hold corporations accountable and bring jobs back to American soil. Meanwhile, consumers are caught in the crossfire. Rising production costs could lead to higher car prices, making it harder for everyday Americans to afford the vehicles they need. And with the government pushing for stricter environmental regulations, the demand for EVs is expected to grow. But at what cost? Why this matters to you? Why should you care about what's happening between Trump, Ford, and GM? Because this isn't just about cars, it's about the future of work, the economy, and the choices you'll have as a consumer. If Trump's criticism leads to drastic changes in the auto industry, it could reshape everything from the types of vehicles available to the prices you'll pay at the dealership. Imagine a world where car prices soar because tariffs have driven up the cost of imported materials, or a scenario where layoffs in the auto industry trickle down to affect your local economy, closing shops and restaurants that once thrived on factory business. Even if you don't drive a Ford or GM vehicle, the repercussions could still land on your doorstep. But there's a bigger picture here. The battle over Ford and GM represents a clash of ideals, the push for technological innovation versus the fight to preserve American jobs. As these companies race to compete with global players, they risk leaving behind the very people who supported them through decades of growth. And Trump's intervention has brought this tension to the forefront, forcing us all to question what kind of future we want for American manufacturing. So is this the bold move we need to save American jobs? Or is it a disaster waiting to happen? The answers could change the auto industry and your life forever. The battle for the future of cars. Ford and General Motors are at the forefront of an electrifying transformation. Both companies have staked billions on the promise of electric vehicles, betting big on a greener, cleaner future. From Ford's ambitious F-150 Lightning to GM's push for an all-electric lineup by 2035, their moves signal a complete shift away from traditional gas-powered vehicles. But as bold as this gamble is, it comes with significant risks. The EV transition isn't just about making sleek battery-powered cars, it's about rewriting the rules of an industry that has depended on internal combustion engines for over a century. Infrastructure, charging networks, and consumer adoption still lag behind the vision these automakers are selling. Meanwhile, competitors like Tesla have already claimed the lion's share of the market, leaving Ford and GM scrambling to catch up. Trump's criticism of this EV push focuses not just on its feasibility, but its cost to American workers. EV batteries often rely on rare earth materials, much of which is sourced from overseas. The assembly process too is increasingly outsourced to factories abroad. For Trump, this shift undermines the core of American manufacturing, and his supporters are rallying behind that message. Trump's vision for the auto industry. Trump's vision for the auto industry harkens back to the golden age of American manufacturing, where cars were built by American hands on American soil. He has been vocal about his disdain for outsourcing and automation, which he views as two of the biggest threats to the working class. This vision clashes directly with Ford and GM strategies, creating a rift that could redefine the future of the industry. Trump's proposed tariffs are meant to bring jobs back to the United States, but critics argue they could cripple the automakers. Higher tariffs would mean higher production costs, which could make EVs even less affordable for consumers. Ford and GM argue that staying competitive globally requires a balance between innovation and cost cutting, something Trump's policies may not allow. This isn't just about keeping jobs in the US, it's about the identity of American cars. Are they still American if their batteries are built in China or their factories are located in Mexico? Trump's rhetoric appeals to those who believe automakers have lost sight of their roots. But the reality of global economics makes this a difficult balancing act. Winners and losers in the EV race. While Ford and GM struggle to navigate these turbulent waters, other players are capitalizing on the chaos. Tesla, already synonymous with electric vehicles, continues to dominate the market with cutting-edge technology and a loyal customer base. Rivian, a newcomer backed by significant investment, is quickly gaining traction with its innovative designs and eco-conscious branding. Meanwhile, foreign automakers like Toyota, Volkswagen, and Hyundai are expanding their EV offerings at breakneck speed. These companies have a significant advantage challenging global markets, where EV adoption is growing faster than in the US. If Ford and GM fail to secure their foothold, they risk being outpaced not just by domestic competitors, but by international ones as well. Workers too are caught in the crossfire. While Ford and GM's investments in EVs create new opportunities, they often come at the expense of traditional manufacturing jobs. Assembly lines that once required thousands of workers are now being replaced by automated systems. For the average factory worker, the shift to EVs feels more like a threat than a promise. Why you should care. This battle isn't just about Ford and GM, it's about the future of transportation, jobs, and the economy as a whole. If these automakers succeed, they could lead a revolution that cements America's place as a leader in green technology. But if they fail, the consequences could ripple across industries, affecting everyone from steel workers to software engineers. For consumers, the stakes are just as high. EVs promise lower emissions and cheaper fuel costs, but they also come with higher price tags and limited infrastructure. Will the average American be able to afford these vehicles, or will EVs remain a luxury for the wealthy? The outcome of this battle will shape not just what we drive, but how we live. Will we see a future where American workers thrive in a revitalized manufacturing sector, or will the industry continue to chase profits at the expense of its people? These questions don't just affect car buyers, they affect every one of us who relies on transportation to power our lives. Jobs on the line. Ford and GM have long been synonymous with American jobs. From assembly lines that built the first mass-produced cars to the sprawling factories in Michigan and Ohio, these companies have been pillars of American employment, but that foundation is beginning to crack. The push toward electric vehicles, automation, and global manufacturing has left many workers wondering if there's a place for them in this new era. Thousands of jobs are already at risk as Ford and GM outsource production to other countries where labor is cheaper. This isn't a new story. Outsourcing has been happening for decades, but it feels different now. Workers are watching as factories close while automakers invest billions in overseas operations. And for many, this shift feels like a betrayal. Trump has capitalized on this sentiment, framing Ford and GM as symbols of corporate greed. His rhetoric resonates with workers who feel left behind, and his promise to bring jobs back to American soil has ignited a fierce debate. Is it even possible to reverse the trend of outsourcing, or is the damage already done? Outsourcing versus staying local. Outsourcing is often painted as the villain, but the reality is more complicated. Automakers argue that moving production overseas allows them to keep costs down and remain competitive in a global market. Building electric vehicles, for example, requires access to specialized components and materials that are often cheaper or more readily available outside the US. Yet, for every dollar saved, there's a cost. Communities that once thrived on manufacturing jobs are left struggling with unemployment and economic decline. The ripple effect extends far beyond the factory floor. Local businesses suffer, schools lose funding, and families are forced to uproot in search of new opportunities. Staying local isn't without its challenges either. Producing cars in America is expensive, and the cost often gets passed on to consumers. Trump's proposed tariffs aim to level the playing field by making it less attractive to outsource, but they could also drive up prices, putting vehicles out of reach for many Americans. This tug of war between cost and loyalty is at the heart of the debate. Can Ford and GM balance the need to innovate with the responsibility to support American workers? Or will the relentless push for profits continue to erode the connection between these companies and the communities they once served? The role of automation. If outsourcing is one side of the coin, automation is the other. While outsourcing moves jobs overseas, automation eliminates them entirely. Robots and advanced machinery now handle tasks that once required human hands, and this trend is only accelerating. For automakers, automation represents progress. It allows for faster production, greater precision, and lower costs. But for workers, it's another threat to their livelihoods. Jobs that took years to master are being replaced by machines, and the skills that once guaranteed employment are becoming obsolete. Trump's stance on automation is clear. He views it as another example of how companies prioritize profits over people. But automakers argue that automation isn't a choice, it's a necessity. Competing in a rapidly evolving industry means embracing technology, even if it comes at a human cost. The question isn't just about whether automation is good or bad, it's about what happens next. How do we prepare workers for a future where machines do much of the work? And how do we ensure that the benefits of automation are shared rather than concentrated at the top? The bigger picture. The struggles at Ford and GM are a microcosm of a larger story. Across industries, workers are grappling with the same questions. What happens when the jobs we've relied on for generations disappear? And how do we adapt to a world where technology and globalization reshape the economy? This isn't just about cars, it's about the identity of American labor. For decades, manufacturing has been a source of pride and stability, offering good wages and a path to the middle class. But as the industry evolves, that promise feels increasingly out of reach. For consumers, the stakes are just as high. If workers lose their jobs, the economy suffers, and that affects everyone. Higher unemployment leads to less spending, which can drag down entire communities. And as the gap between rich and poor widens, the social fabric of the country begins to fray. This battle over jobs and automation isn't just about Ford and GM, it's about what kind of country we want to be. Will we find a way to balance progress with fairness, or will we continue down a path where profits come first and people come second? Lessons from Tesla. Tesla has redefined what it means to be an automaker. While Ford and GM are scrambling to navigate the transition to electric vehicles, Tesla has already solidified its place as the leader in the EV market. The company didn't just embrace change, it created it. From groundbreaking battery technology to direct-to-consumer sales, Tesla's strategies have set a new standard for the industry. Tesla's innovations aren't just technical, they're cultural. The brand has become synonymous with the future, a symbol of progress that appeals to tech-savvy consumers and eco-conscious buyers alike. This cultural cachet gives Tesla a distinct advantage over legacy automakers like Ford and GM, who are still working to shed their old reputations. Ford and GM are trying to follow suit, but they're playing catch-up in a game Tesla already dominates. Ford's F-150 Lightning and GM's Ultium platform are ambitious projects, but they're up against Tesla's established brand loyalty and technological head start. Tesla's supercharger network, for example, is a game changer in terms of convenience and reliability, while Ford and GM are still working to expand their own charging infrastructure. And then there's Tesla's approach to manufacturing. By vertically integrating their supply chain and focusing on in-house production, Tesla has avoided many of the delays and complications that have plagued traditional automakers. Ford and GM, by contrast, are relying on third-party suppliers for key components like batteries, a dependency that leaves them vulnerable to disruptions. This isn't just about technology, it's about identity. Tesla has built its reputation as a disruptor, while Ford and GM are still seen as legacy automakers. That perception could make all the difference. Can Ford and GM convince consumers that they're ready for the future, or will Tesla continue to steal the spotlight? The role of policy. Government policy has always played a significant role in shaping the auto industry, and the current moment is no exception. From tax credits for EV buyers to subsidies for battery production, the federal government has poured resources into supporting the EV transition. These policies are meant to accelerate the shift toward cleaner energy, but not everyone agrees on how this should be done. Trump's criticism of these policies is loud and clear. He argues that they unfairly favor companies like Tesla while burdening traditional automakers with regulations and costs. For Trump, this isn't just about EVs. It's about protecting the American worker and ensuring that the benefits of innovation are felt across the entire economy, not just concentrated in a few companies. For Ford and GM, these policies are both a blessing and a curse. On one hand, they benefit from incentives to build EVs, which help offset the massive costs of retooling their factories and developing new technologies. On the other hand, they face pressure to meet strict emission standards and timelines that may not align with their capabilities. The tension between innovation and regulation is at the heart of the debate. On one side, there's the push for a greener future. On the other, the need to protect jobs and keep cars affordable. Trump's vision of a strong, self-reliant America often clashes with the realities of a global economy, leaving automakers stuck in the middle. State policies add another layer of complexity. California, for example, has introduced aggressive targets for EV adoption, which Ford and GM must navigate even as they try to appease other regions where consumers are less enthusiastic about EVs. This patchwork of regulations creates additional challenges, forcing automakers to adapt to conflicting demands while trying to stay competitive on a global scale. What's at stake for consumers? The future of Ford and GM isn't just about the companies, it's about the people who buy their cars. For consumers, the shift to electric vehicles represents both opportunity and uncertainty. On the one hand, EVs promise lower maintenance costs, cheaper fuel, and a smaller carbon footprint. Electric motors have fewer moving parts than traditional engines, meaning fewer things can go wrong. Charging at home is significantly cheaper than filling up at the pump, and government incentives can help offset the initial cost of buying an EV. But on the other hand, there are real challenges. EVs come with higher upfront costs, limited charging infrastructure, and questions about long-term reliability. For many Americans, especially those in rural areas or regions with harsh winters, the leap to EVs feels more like a gamble than a guarantee. Charging stations aren't as ubiquitous as gas stations, and concerns about range anxiety still loom large. Ford and GM are betting that consumers will embrace this change, but they're up against significant barriers. Charging networks are still in their infancy, and the high price of EVs puts them out of reach for many families. The automakers are working on more affordable models, but whether these will arrive in time to meet consumer expectations remains uncertain. Then there's the issue of performance. While EVs offer impressive acceleration and efficiency, some consumers worry about how they'll handle extreme conditions. Cold weather can reduce battery range, and towing heavy loads can drain power quickly. These concerns are particularly relevant for truck buyers, a market segment Ford and GM rely on heavily. For consumers, the stakes are personal. This isn't just about what kind of car you drive, it's about how you get to work, how much you spend on transportation, and how your choices impact the environment. For now, the promise of EVs remains enticing, but the reality is still catching up. Ford and GM will need to address these concerns head on if they want to win over skeptical buyers. Where do we go from here? The road ahead for Ford and GM is anything but smooth. They're navigating a perfect storm of technological disruption, economic uncertainty, and political pressure. But within this chaos lies an opportunity, a chance to redefine themselves for a new era. To succeed, Ford and GM will need to do more than build great cars. They'll need to rebuild trust with their workers, their consumers, and the communities they serve. They'll need to prove that they can innovate without sacrificing their values, and that they can compete in a global market while staying true to their American roots. This isn't just about Ford and GM, it's about the future of the auto industry, the economy, and the planet. If these companies rise to the challenge, they could lead a revolution that positions America as a leader in sustainable technology. But if they fail, the consequences could be dire. For workers, the stakes are existential. The rise of automation and outsourcing has already transformed the nature of work, and the EV transition threatens to accelerate these trends. Communities that have depended on auto manufacturing for generations are at risk of being left behind, and finding solutions will require cooperation from all sides: automakers, policymakers, and workers themselves. For consumers, the stakes are equally high. The cars we drive are more than just tools. They're symbols of freedom, identity, and progress. Ford and GM's ability to navigate this transition will determine whether the average American can afford to participate in the EV revolution, or if it remains a luxury for the few. And for the industry as a whole, the stakes are global. The competition is fierce, and the winners will be the ones who can adapt the fastest. Tesla has already proven what's possible, but the question now is whether legacy automakers like Ford and GM can follow suit, or if they'll become relics of a bygone era. This isn't just a story about cars, it's a story about who we are and where we're going. The choices Ford and GM make today will shape the economy, the environment, and the way we live for decades to come. The road ahead is uncertain, but one thing is clear: the future of American automakers is a future we all have a stake in. What's your opinion on this topic? Let's talk about it in the comments.